I walked into our bedroom after a long day at work to find my wife Natalie calmly packing a weekend bag while texting someone on her phone with a wide grin I hadn't seen directed at me in months. When I asked what was going on and where she was planning to go, she barely glanced up from her phone screen before sighing deeply like I was interrupting something important. "I'm finally upgrading," she said flatly, still typing away on her phone without making eye contact with me. The word upgrading hit me harder than the actual affair itself, landing like a punch directly to my chest. She said it so casually, like she was talking about getting a newer car model or switching to a better phone plan rather than ending our 8-year marriage. She admitted without any apparent guilt or hesitation that she'd been sleeping with her boss, an executive named Preston, for at least 4 months now. She explained this like she was telling me about a work project, completely matter-of-fact and emotionless. In that terrible moment, the betrayal felt deeply humiliating and intensely personal, like I wasn't even worth the effort of lying to properly anymore. "He can give me the life I actually deserve," she added, finally looking at me with something close to pity mixed with contempt. "You've been adequate, but I need more than adequate now." I stood there completely speechless, watching this woman I'd built a life with dismiss our entire relationship as simply adequate. While packing designer clothes, I'd helped pay for into luggage for a weekend with another man. She left the next morning without looking back even once, pulling her suitcase down our front steps while talking cheerfully on her phone, presumably to Preston. No meaningful conversation happened between us. No remorse showed on her face. She genuinely believed with absolute certainty she was walking confidently into a much better life with a wealthy, successful executive who would provide everything I apparently couldn't. I sat alone at the kitchen table for hours afterward, staring blankly at her untouched coffee mug, still sitting exactly where she'd left it that morning, wondering how long she had secretly seen me as completely disposable. The house felt utterly foreign suddenly, like I was an unwelcome guest in my own life rather than someone who'd lived here for 6 years. Our 2 kids, thankfully, were staying with my parents that weekend, spared from witnessing their mother's cold departure. I'd have to explain this situation to them eventually, but I couldn't even process it myself yet, let alone find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. I went through her closet and drawers, finding half her belongings already gone. Apparently she'd been planning this exit for weeks, systematically removing her things while I was at work, completely oblivious. The evidence of her calculated departure was everywhere once I actually looked for it. Later that week, while going through old work photos from the company events Natalie had occasionally brought me to over the years, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. In several pictures, Preston's hand rested a little too comfortably on his wife's shoulder, his wedding ring clearly visible. The upgrade Natalie was so proud of was married with 3 children of his own. I zoomed in on one particular photo from a holiday party 2 years ago. Preston's wife stood beside him smiling genuinely for the camera, completely unaware that her husband was the type of man who'd destroy 2 families for an affair. She looked kind in that photo, with warm eyes and an authentic smile that suggested she actually believed in the life they'd built together. The complete unfairness of the situation gnawed at me constantly over the following days. Preston got to maintain his polished facade at work and presumably at home, while my life fell apart publicly and dramatically. Natalie had told several mutual friends about leaving me for someone more successful, framing herself as someone who'd finally found real happiness after settling for me. Meanwhile, Preston's wife was living in complete ignorance just like I had been, thinking her marriage was stable while her husband gradually destroyed it behind her back. The more I thought about her situation, the more wrong it felt to stay silent and let her continue living in that false reality. I debated intensely for several days whether I should tell Preston's wife the truth about what was happening. Part of me wanted to just focus on my own situation, get through the divorce quietly, and rebuild my life without creating more drama or conflict. But another part of me, the part that remembered how humiliating it felt to be the last person to know about my own spouse's betrayal, couldn't let her stay in the dark. I didn't want revenge exactly, though I'd be lying if I said the thought didn't cross my mind repeatedly. What I really wanted was for Preston's wife to have the same information I'd been forced to discover, the truth she deserved to know about who she was actually married to and what her life really looked like behind the facade. After almost a week of internal debate, I finally found her profile on social media. Her name was Simone, and her page was filled with family photos, cheerful updates about her children's activities, and loving posts about Preston that made my stomach turn knowing what I knew. She had no idea her perfect family image was built on lies. I sent her a short, carefully worded message through the platform. "Hi Simone, I'm Natalie's husband. I know this is strange, but I have some information about our spouses that I think you need to hear. Do you have time to talk in person? I understand if you prefer not to." I hit send before I could second-guess the decision again. She responded within 10 minutes. "Tomorrow afternoon, name the place." We met the next day in a quiet cafe on the opposite side of town, where neither of us was likely to run into anyone we knew. Simone arrived exactly on time, walking in with visible tension in her shoulders and anxiety written across her face. She sat down across from me at the corner table I'd chosen, her hands already trembling slightly as she wrapped them around the coffee cup she'd ordered. "I already suspect something," she said quietly before I could even begin explaining. "I've suspected for months, actually, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was inventing problems that didn't exist because of my own insecurities. Part of me hoped this meeting would prove I was wrong." When I told her the complete truth about Preston and Natalie's affair, the timeline, the details Natalie had casually admitted, the weekend trips they'd been taking together while claiming work conferences, Simone closed her eyes slowly, exhaled one long, shaky breath, and whispered simply, "Thank you for telling me." There was no dramatic scene, no crying or yelling or throwing things. Just a calm, terrifying resolve settling gradually into her face as she processed information she'd probably known deep down but hadn't wanted to confirm. Her hand stopped trembling. Her jaw set firmly. Something fundamental shifted in her expression within those few minutes. "I need copies of anything you have," she said, her voice suddenly steady and businesslike. "Text messages, emails, dates, locations, whatever proof exists. Can you provide that?" I nodded, pulling out my phone where I'd already organized everything. "I'll send it all to you today." Within 3 days of our meeting, Simone had retained a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but apparently one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state, with a reputation for absolutely destroying unfaithful spouses in court. She moved with calculated precision that honestly impressed me given how calm she'd seemed in that cafe. She froze Preston's access to their joint accounts immediately. She pulled years of financial records, scrutinizing every transaction with her lawyer's help. What they found was apparently worse than just the affair. Preston had been spending significant amounts of their shared money on Natalie for months. Hotel rooms charged to their family credit card, expensive gifts, even a weekend trip to a resort that Preston had claimed was a solo work retreat. The financial infidelity added another layer to the betrayal, giving Simone's lawyer ammunition that went beyond just the affair itself. Preston came home one evening to find Simone waiting with her attorney, a detailed accounting of his spending, and divorce papers already prepared. It was the first time I saw cracks appearing in his supposedly perfect executive life. Through Simone's occasional text updates, I learned Preston had tried to talk his way out of the situation initially, using the same charm and confidence that probably worked for him in business settings. But Simone wasn't a business negotiation. She was a woman who'd been systematically betrayed and had documented evidence of exactly how thoroughly. Word spread surprisingly quickly within Preston's company once the divorce proceedings became official. Professional networks are smaller than people think, and rumors travel fast when they involve executives behaving badly. Preston's performance at work apparently plummeted under the stress of the divorce proceedings and the whispered gossip following him through the office. He tried desperately to maintain control and keep up his polished professional image, but Simon's legal strategy was suffocatingly thorough and very public. Every filing became part of public record. Every financial disclosure revealed another layer of deception. His carefully constructed reputation crumbled steadily under the weight of documented evidence. Meanwhile, Natalie defended Preston proudly to anyone who would listen, thinking she was bravely standing beside a powerful man going through a difficult divorce. She posted vague social media messages about real love and finding your person and not letting others define your happiness. She was completely unaware that Preston was hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate between legal fees and asset division. I watched all of this unfold from a distance, focusing primarily on my own divorce proceedings and my children's well-being. My lawyer assured me that Natalie's affair and abandonment of the family would work heavily in my favor for custody arrangements, which provided some comfort during those difficult weeks. My kids knew something was wrong but didn't understand the full situation yet. I kept things age-appropriate, explaining that Mom and Dad were separating because we weren't happy together anymore, leaving out the painful details they didn't need to carry. Natalie tried calling me multiple times during those weeks, apparently wanting to justify her choices and explain why she'd done what she'd done. I declined every call, letting them go to voicemail where she'd leave long, rambling messages that alternated between defensive justification and angry accusations that I'd somehow forced her into the affair by not being ambitious enough. I deleted the messages without listening to most of them beyond the first few seconds. There was nothing she could say that would change anything or that I needed to hear at this point. Instead, I focused my energy on my children, my job performance, and stabilizing my own life during this chaotic period. Simone sent me occasional updates about the divorce proceedings, not out of spite or revenge, but out of a strange sense of shared survival. We'd both been betrayed by the same affair. Both had our lives upended by two selfish people who thought they deserved something better. Our brief messages back and forth became oddly comforting. Someone who understood exactly what this particular situation felt like without needing lengthy explanations. He's fighting the asset division, one message from her read, claiming he needs to maintain his lifestyle for work purposes. My lawyer laughed. Natalie sent me an email saying I drove her away by working too much, I replied. Apparently it's my fault she cheated for 4 months. They really do think they're the victims here, don't they? She responded. A few weeks after our initial cafe meeting, Simone suggested we meet again, this time intentionally rather than out of necessity to share information. We chose a different cafe, one with outdoor seating and a more relaxed atmosphere than our first tense meeting. We talked for almost 3 hours that afternoon about our children, our exes, and the complete absurdity of how quickly life can flip from stable to chaotic. She admitted she felt deeply embarrassed for not seeing the signs of Preston's affair sooner, the late nights at work, the sudden interest in his appearance, the distance that had grown between them over the past year. I kept telling myself it was just stress from work, she explained, stirring her coffee absently. That executives work long hours and I needed to be more understanding. I actually apologized to him once for being needy when I asked why he never seemed interested in spending time with me anymore. I told her I felt exactly the same way, that I'd noticed Natalie pulling away emotionally but had attributed it to normal relationship ups and downs rather than a systematic affair. She criticized everything about me for months, I admitted. My job, my clothes, how I spent my free time. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. The honesty between us was strangely easy and comfortable, like talking to someone who spoke a language nobody else understood. We'd both been through something specific and painful that was hard to explain to friends who hadn't experienced it. A few weeks after that second meeting, Simone called me with something that sounded almost like laughter in her voice. "I have a completely ridiculous idea," she said, "but hear me out before you say no." She explained that she'd been monitoring Preston's social media and had noticed he was apparently obsessing over what she was doing and who she was spending time with now that they were separated. "He keeps checking my location, asking the kids weird questions about what I'm doing. And apparently Natalie is doing the same thing to you based on what my lawyer heard from yours." "So what's the ridiculous idea?" I asked, already amused by where this might be going. "Let's give them something real to worry about," she said, her tone shifting from amused to slightly more serious. "Let's go out somewhere public where people we know might see us. Make it look like we're on a date. Let them spiral over it for a while." I laughed initially, thinking she was joking, but she sent me a screenshot of text messages between Preston and Natalie where they were clearly discussing both of our lives obsessively, analyzing every social media post and reported activity like jealous teenagers. "You know what?" I said after thinking about it for a moment. "That's petty and ridiculous and I'm absolutely in. Let's do it." "Friday night," she suggested. "That Italian place downtown with the big windows, very visible, very public." "Perfect, I'll make a reservation." We went out for dinner that Friday night, deliberately choosing a table near the large front windows where we'd be clearly visible to anyone passing by on the busy downtown street. We dressed nicely, not dramatically overdone, but definitely like two people on an actual date rather than just friends grabbing casual food. But something unexpected happened during that dinner. The conversation didn't feel fake or forced at all. Simone was incredibly easy to talk to, grounded, self-aware, and genuinely funny in ways I hadn't expected from our previous brief meetings. She told stories about her kids that made me laugh, shared her perspective on the divorce process with refreshing honesty, and asked thoughtful questions about my own situation. We talked about our careers, our childhoods, our hopes for what came after all this legal chaos settled. At one point, I realized I'd completely forgotten this was supposed to be a fake date designed to annoy our exes. I was actually enjoying myself, genuinely interested in what she was saying and looking forward to her responses to my own stories. Near the end of the meal, she paused and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This is nice," she said simply. "Just normal." I'd forgotten what it felt like to have a conversation with someone who actually listened and responded like they cared about the answer. "I was thinking the exact same thing," I admitted. "This might have started as a petty plan, but I'm really glad we did it." "Want to do it again sometime?" she asked. "For real this time, not as a performance." "Definitely." We went out 2 more times over the following weeks, and neither of us pretended they were anything other than actual dates now. On our third outing, a weekend afternoon at a local museum the kids weren't interested in, something fundamental shifted between us. We were standing in front of a painting, and I made some probably stupid joke about the artistic technique. Simone laughed, not politely, but genuinely, with her whole face lighting up in a way that made something warm spread through my chest. The moment felt remarkably simple and authentic. No bitterness hanging between us. No pain coloring every interaction. Just two people who'd been badly bruised finding something steady and real again. I caught her looking at me differently after that moment, more curiously, more thoughtfully, like she was seeing me as an actual person rather than just a fellow victim of the same affair. The connection between us had quietly grown into something beyond shared trauma or strategic revenge. "Can I ask you something potentially weird?" she said as we sat on a bench in the museum's sculpture garden afterward. "After everything we've been through, I don't think anything qualifies as weird anymore," I replied. "Are we doing this?" she asked directly. "Actually doing this, I mean. dating for real, seeing where it goes, or are we just two hurt people finding comfort in familiarity? I thought about her question seriously before answering. I think it started as the second thing, I said honestly, but it doesn't feel like that anymore, at least not to me. Meanwhile, Preston's carefully constructed world continued its spectacular collapse. The divorce settlement was finalized after 3 months of aggressive legal battling, and it absolutely wiped out half of Preston's considerable assets. What remained was quickly shredded by legal fees that had accumulated into six figures during the contentious proceedings. Simon's lawyer had been ruthlessly thorough, documenting every financial indiscretion and arguing successfully that Preston's affair and deception justified a heavily favorable settlement for Simon. The judge agreed, apparently unimpressed by Preston's attempts to maintain that he deserved to keep most of the marital assets because he'd been the primary earner. Preston was forced to sell his expensive luxury car, replacing it with something far more modest. He downsized from their spacious house to a much smaller rental property. He cut back dramatically on every luxury he'd previously flaunted: the country club membership, the expensive wardrobe, the frequent high-end restaurant meals. The lifestyle he'd presented to Natalie as an upgrade was evaporating rapidly before their eyes. Natalie and Preston suddenly realized together that their imagined perfect life was completely unsustainable financially. The executive salary that had seemed so impressive was now split between two households, child support obligations, alimony payments, and the aftermath of extremely expensive legal proceedings. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard they were fighting frequently about money, something they'd apparently never had to discuss seriously before because Preston had simply handled everything while appearing wealthy and successful. Natalie came to my house one evening several months into the separation, arriving unannounced and furious. She stood on my front porch practically vibrating with anger, immediately launching into accusations before I could even fully open the door. "You ruined everything," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "My entire life fell apart because you couldn't just let things go. You had to tell that woman about us, had to make everything complicated and difficult when it could have been simple." I stared at her, genuinely amazed at her ability to rewrite reality so thoroughly in her own mind. "I ruined your life," I said slowly. "You're the one who had an affair for 4 months, Natalie. You're the one who walked out calling it an upgrade. I just told another betrayed spouse the truth she deserved to know. Preston lost everything in that divorce because of you," she continued, ignoring my words completely. "We can barely afford to live now. He stressed constantly about money. This isn't the life we were supposed to have together." "Then maybe you shouldn't have started a relationship with a married man who was about to lose half his assets in a divorce," I replied, my patience wearing thin. "You made these choices, Natalie, every single one of them. What's happening now is just consequences." She didn't like hearing that truth at all. For the first time since she'd walked out months ago, she looked genuinely scared, not of me, but of her own choices and their very real repercussions. The confidence she'd had while packing that weekend bag was completely gone, replaced by fear and regret she couldn't quite articulate. The custody discussions were tense, but ultimately manageable with lawyers mediating most of the actual negotiations. Natalie tried initially to argue for 50-50 custody, presenting herself as a devoted mother who'd simply made some personal life choices that didn't affect her parenting. But the judge noted her recent instability clearly, leaving the family home abruptly, moving in with a man going through a contentious divorce, the affair itself, and what it suggested about her judgment and priorities. Her own lawyer seemed to recognize they were fighting an uphill battle. Ultimately, I was awarded primary physical custody of both children, with Natalie getting them every other weekend and one evening per week. She was also ordered to pay child support based on her income, a reversal she clearly hadn't anticipated when she'd left, assuming she'd be moving into Preston's wealthy lifestyle. When the judge read the custody arrangement aloud in the courtroom, Natalie looked absolutely stunned, like she'd never imagined a world where she wasn't automatically the favored parent. She walked into this process apparently assuming her affair wouldn't have real consequences for her relationship with the kids. "This is ridiculous," she said to her lawyer loud enough for me to hear as we left the courtroom. "How can he get primary custody? I'm their mother." Her lawyer responded quietly, probably reminding her that being a mother doesn't trump abandoning your family for an affair with your married boss. But I didn't hear the exact words. Simone and I had been dating seriously for about 3 months when we decided our respective children should meet. We planned it carefully, not wanting to force anything or make it feel like a big dramatic event that would put pressure on the kids. We chose a casual outing to a local park on a Saturday afternoon. Low pressure. Lots of space for the kids to play without feeling obligated to interact if they didn't want to. Easy exit strategies if things went poorly. My 2 kids came with me, and Simone brought her 3 children, all of us meeting at the playground area. To our genuine surprise and relief, the kids clicked together remarkably quickly. Within 15 minutes, they were all playing together like they'd known each other for years rather than minutes. My daughter naturally took the hand of Simone's youngest and helped her up the climbing structure. My son started an elaborate imaginary game that pulled in all the other kids enthusiastically. They didn't know the full, complicated story behind why their parents were together. They just saw potential new friends and a fun afternoon at the park. Watching them play together felt significant somehow, like witnessing a new chapter beginning to write itself without our direct involvement. Simone stood next to me watching them, and I felt her hand slip into mine naturally. "They're going to be okay," she said quietly. "All of them. Despite everything their parents put them through, they're going to be just fine." "Yeah," I agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "I think they really are." After that successful first meeting, we started spending increasingly more time together as a combined group. Weekends naturally blended. A trip to the zoo with all 5 kids, movie nights at one of our houses, casual dinners where the children's laughter filled whatever space we occupied. The kids grew genuinely familiar and comfortable with each other over the following months, developing real friendships that existed independent of their parents' relationship. They had inside jokes, played together without prompting, and asked about each other when they were apart. Simone stepped naturally into a warm, caring role with my children, never trying to replace their mother, but offering stability and kindness they desperately needed during this chaotic transition period. She helped with homework, listened to their stories about school, remembered details about their interests, and brought them small, thoughtful gifts related to things they'd mentioned in passing. I found myself looking forward to our quiet evenings together after the kids went to bed, sitting on the couch with coffee or wine, talking about everything and nothing, building something that felt solid and real rather than performative or desperate. "This feels right," Simone said one evening after we'd gotten all the kids settled into sleeping bags for an impromptu indoor camping night. "Not perfect, not without complications, but genuinely right. Does that make sense?" "Complete sense," I agreed. "It's probably the most right thing I've felt in years, honestly." After almost a full year of slowly, cautiously growing closer, Simone and I had a serious conversation about living together. It wasn't dramatically romantic or impulsive. It was practical and genuine, which somehow felt more meaningful than grand gestures would have been. "We're maintaining 2 complete households," Simone pointed out logically as we sat at her kitchen table going over schedules and logistics. "2 sets of everything: furniture, kitchen supplies, utilities, internet streaming services. 2 different school districts we're coordinating between. 2 different bedrooms the kids bounce between. It's exhausting and inefficient." "And expensive," I added. We're basically duplicating all our living expenses when we spend most of our time together anyway. Exactly, she agreed. So what if we combined households, found a place big enough for everyone, or renovated one of our current houses to accommodate the whole combined family? Just simplify everything and stop living in this weird split existence. We talked through the practical concerns carefully, the kids' adjustment, what our exes would think or say, the financial logistics, the timeline that made sense. But underneath all the practical discussion, there was something deeper, the acknowledgement that this relationship had become central to both our lives, and we wanted to build something permanent together. I want to be clear about something, I said carefully. This isn't about revenge on our exes or proving something to them. This is about us building something real because we genuinely want to, right? Absolutely, Simone confirmed without hesitation. If this was just about spite, I wouldn't bring my children into it. We moved in together gradually over the course of several weeks, combining households box by box to make the transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved. We decided to keep Simone's house because it was larger and in a better school district for all the children. My kids adjusted remarkably well, excited about the new arrangement and their new expanded family. Simone's children seemed equally happy, particularly once they saw their mother genuinely smiling and relaxed in ways they probably hadn't seen in years. The house felt noticeably warmer and more alive with everyone under one roof. Simone made the decision to become a stay-at-home parent and step-parent, something she'd always wanted, but had never felt financially secure enough to do during her marriage to Preston. With my income and the child support we both received, we could manage comfortably on one salary, and having her home provided stability all the children needed. Her presence grounded the entire household in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. She created routines and traditions, made sure everyone felt heard and valued, and brought a calm organization to our lives that had been missing during the chaotic previous years. "You know what the best part is?" she asked me one evening as we prepared dinner together while the kids did homework at the table. "I actually feel like myself again. Like I found the life I was supposed to be living all along, just took a weird detour to get here." Meanwhile, Preston's life continued its downward trajectory in ways that would have seemed almost unbelievable if we weren't watching it happen in real time. The former executive who'd presented himself as wildly successful and wealthy now lived in a cramped two-bedroom rental apartment that he could barely afford. He paid substantial alimony to Simone every month. He paid significant child support for his 3 children. He was still paying off debt accumulated during the divorce proceedings. His entire, carefully constructed, wealthy executive lifestyle had collapsed completely under the weight of actual financial reality. His career never recovered from the scandal either. While the affair itself might have been forgiven in the business world eventually, the very public nature of the divorce and the financial mismanagement it revealed had quietly tanked his professional credibility. He'd been passed over for 2 promotions he'd expected to receive, and had been quietly moved to a less prestigious position in a different department. Natalie's life had spiraled in similarly dramatic fashion. She paid child support to me every month, a constant reminder of the life and children she'd abandoned for what she'd thought would be something better. The payments clearly ate at her pride every time she had to transfer the money. They'd moved in together out of financial necessity rather than desire, splitting rent on an apartment neither of them particularly liked, but both could barely afford. Our home continued growing into something genuinely peaceful over the following year. The children thrived in the environment. Their grades improved. They made friends easily. They seemed emotionally settled in ways they hadn't been during the chaos of the divorces and transitions. All 5 kids genuinely saw themselves as siblings now rather than 2 separate families forced together. We made a deliberate decision together that we would never legally marry. Marriage would actually benefit the people who'd betrayed us. If Simone and I married, Preston's alimony obligations would end immediately. Similarly, there would be financial implications affecting the child support arrangements we both received. A simple cohabitation agreement protected everyone involved, our children, our assets, our stability, without creating benefits for Preston and Natalie.